Good evening, everyone. Hello, how are we all? So, today we are starting the new Patreon design. Here he is, the little owl. This is going to be the fourth and final design in the Patreon series. I do have to preface this stream by saying somehow I managed to pull my neck getting out of bed this morning. So we'll see how the stream goes. It could end up being a Q&A stream, but the work needs to get started. So let's see how we go. If I look a bit stiff and weird moving around, then that's why. But we're going to start on the easiest part of this whole print. Start on this little branch down here. And as always, if anyone has questions and stuff as we're going through, pop them in the chat. And I will answer them as we go. Hi George. Hi Nigel. Nigel, thank you. Thank you. I did message you, but thank you again. That means a lot. I've got a really good hard piece of wood here for this key block. We're going to need it with all these fine lines. And of course, very well kept and sharp knife. But how's everyone been? What's everyone been up to? Yeah, it's more just taking extremely hot baths and stretching. It's not like cripplingly bad. It's just very stiff at the moment. In fact, I'll put the chat up on my phone. Yeah, George, I saw your post on Facebook. Congratulations on getting back up and running. Hi, Eric. So, what I do, it all depends on the image that you're working with. So, if I zoom out quickly on this, all I have traced is the key block, so the main outline block. And with woodblock printing, specifically ukiyo-e style prints, all of the information that you'll need for the colours is generally housed within that key block. So if I can get a sheet of paper, I will draw out a very rough example of what I mean. So let's say that this circle here that is split into four. Say that this is our outline block, and we have one colour that is red, one that's green, one that's blue, one that's yellow. The only information you need to make that entire print is this general outline. You'll then make however many separations for your colour blocks. Once you've carved your key block, you'll make, for example, this. You would make four separations, and then carve one, carve two, carve three, carve four. And it is as simple as that. You don't, if you're doing something that has a lot of things that aren't bound by a key block, then it might be a good idea to then do a tracing of those, but do be wary of that, because your key block, you're not going to be carving exactly 100% everything exactly the same as you see on the screen. Your carving will alter very slightly and will deviate very slightly from the original image. So that's something to be careful of. So if you are doing something where, say, there's two key blocks, or for example the avatar print that I've just completed, there was 3 key blocks on that. Paste all of those key blocks down at the same time. Trace them all together and then paste them down at the same time, and then you're going to minimize the risk of, you can at least eliminate the risk of conditions affecting the paper on which you'll make the colour transfers from. My advice would be with what, can you give any information as to what the reproduction, what image it is, what print it is that you are reproducing? On this design, for example, there was a couple of areas that weren't bound by a key block, but it doesn't matter too much for me because I have simplified the overall design. There was a few, just a couple of colour blocks that I'm not using to save time and a bit of money. Like, I'm not using the on the exterior of the image up here and down here somewhere there's some flowers and stuff, and to make my life a bit easier I haven't included those flowers, because the original print was a landscape design. Hi Ben, how are you? Okay, cool. Yeah, chuck it up on the Facebook group, and I'll have a look and give some suggestions if I'm able to. As I said, the danger with tracing everything all in one is that your carving will deviate from the original, and that's just a matter of fact for anyone. And if you have very fine registration, then you do run the risk of moving into registration issues that then are rather hard to correct. So if you have two colours that meet that aren't by key block, so give me 2 seconds, let me just carve this little bit out and I will show you an example on the avatar print. Hi Marion, how are you? So, just here on this test print, you can't see too well. I'll draw it in. I'll use this blue highlighter. So just here, we can see there is two colours that meet, and the same along, this is probably a better example, here, this split between the lines, and there's in fact three colours that go over that. So you have the yellow, you have the orange, and then you have the very pale gradient that rides up over. And you also see it in here. So what I'll do is you carve the base colours as usual, as you normally would. So that is this colour here and this colour here. And then what I'll do is when I make my colour separations, I'll print one more and I will overlap them. So I'll overlap the separation for this one here over this. And on a light box, so that I can make sure they're perfectly lined up, I'll put a bit of tape down and you just draw it in with a pencil onto your separation sheet. And the same through here. I just took a pencil and just traced through to make sure that top darkest colour, because it's generally the darkest colour that will meet a lighter colour edge. You just trace it through on a light box or a window or something like that, and it gives you then the information that you need to just carve. And I always carve, especially with something like this, I'll carve that overlapping layer slightly smaller than I need to, because you can never guarantee. So it gives you scope then to go back in and do a bit of trimming and a bit of altering if needs be. Does that make sense? Hopefully. No problem, Nigel. And there's going to be a few good examples of this in some upcoming prints I'm doing for Jed, where I've got a couple of key blocks and a few areas not bound by those key blocks. So once we've got this out the way and I start work on those, there'll be a lot of good opportunity to talk through those types of things. You see them a lot more. It's a lot more of a common occurrence in the Shinhanga style images as opposed to the more like classical ukiyo-e style. And that was generally just as a time saver. In ukiyo-e they were trying to make them very quick and generally quite cheap, so it didn't make sense to have a load of additional work for the carver to sort of go get test prints done or things like that from the printer, and then to keep adding information in himself. But places like the Yoshida workshop and stuff, they were all working in-house, so you had all the carvers were working next to the printers and stuff like that, and that's how they ended up with that system of sometimes moving up into sort of like 50, 60 impressions. And also in the Edo period there was government censorship on how many colours and stuff could be used in a design, because it started to sort of head that way where people were doing really large scale work and the government censors put a stop to that, and they were sort of capped, and each print had to be approved and have a censorship seal stamped on the design. So by binding everything within that key block, they were then able to save time and money and able to include detail and more depth with the colours and stuff. It really was, and there's some interesting anecdotes from that we can find in these prints actually. So, as we all know, at that time, it's still a largely samurai. The samurai and stuff were still rather strong within society and things like that, and they of course faced very strict regulation on what they could and couldn't do. And at the time you had this rise in the commoner classes of the floating world, which is where the name, as you all know, ukiyo-e comes from, is derived from. And these were all places like the hostess bars and the kabuki bars and things like that, and all the theatre and stuff was popping up, and the samurai class, not wanting to miss out on a good party and the night's action and stuff, would head down there. And supposedly, there were small hatches placed in the back of these establishments and stuff, in which the samurais could crawl in and crawl out, and go unnoticed, and go and watch the shows, and go to the hostess bars and the more seedy establishments and stuff, and have their night's fun. But also we can see this in the prints, that through the regulation and stuff, the publishers and things could not produce images of this type of thing. This is at a very specific time. So to counteract what they did was they would use the... Yeah, exactly, George. What was I saying? So yeah, so the images you see of the courtesans and the geishas and stuff like that, they were all essentially covert advertising for these upcoming shows and for the popular girls of the time and things like that, and the kimono and things that were in fashion and stuff like that. And it was all essentially advertising for this growing sort of social aspect of old Tokyo. And it was all done in this way to bypass that censorship and to be able to get their information and be able to peddle their businesses out to the public. And of course all of these designers and craftsmen and stuff were part of those areas of Tokyo. So you have the Shitamati district and stuff, and Asakusa, where Dave's shop now was a huge factor in the building of that social side of Tokyo. And it was where all the old studios and all the old workshops and stuff were. So they were right down in the thick of it. And of course there was many craftsmen, and they could take a design, carve it, and get it done in a couple of weeks, ready for the next show or next new kimono design to come out and things like that. Or so I've read. And then with the Meiji Restoration, a lot of those old ways came to an end, and as we know, the samurai class fell into decline, and pre and post-war Japan was a very different place than what it was 50 or 60 years previous, and that then gave rise to the inventive publishers that helped to patronise the Shinhanga movement. They were indeed. It was a art form of the people, and that rode against what the nobility stood for. That peasant class only a few hundred years previous were a means of taxation and easy forces to, and very expendable forces for an army. Oftentimes, that peasant class were given next to no training and sent out with a stick, a pointed stick pretty much, and sent out to their deaths as a means of gaining fame and glory for their leaders and their rulers. And of course there's one. They did indeed. Yeah, you're correct there, George. There was a lot of product placement and there was a lot of advertising and stuff, and that's what a lot of Hiroshige's images were of. They would travel like you would see now. Like visit Vancouver or visit Brazil or somewhere like that. It was a means of advertising travel, because up until that point, travel and holidaying was banned. People couldn't go and do it. And once they were allowed to, people wanted to go out and see the country and see what was out there and see the sights and stuff. And a perfect way to do that was to get someone of the talent of Hiroshige to go out there and document it. He does indeed. I've spoken for quite great lengths with Dave about those subjects and stuff. And there's of course probably the most popular forms of woodblock prints at the time were the more inappropriate images and stuff. And there was probably just as much, if not more, of that content produced as there ever was anything else. It's just that we don't see that today, because where's the value in that when someone can sell a Yoshida print for thousands of pounds? Talking back to the samurai class, George, you'll probably know this. Who was the warrior that fought under Nobunaga, who then became essentially ruler in his place and was started out as a peasant warrior? The name slips my mind, but you'll probably know. Was it Date or something like that? Date something. Yeah, that's right, George. And why would they want to submit to the rulings of the censorship committees and the governments and stuff? They were the people that were trying to stop the merchant class from rising and trying to suppress that peasant class. So of course there was going to be a pushback and they were going to find ways in which they could bypass those and trick those censors into putting out what they really wanted to. Yeah, it could be Hideyoshi. Yeah, that could be correct, Eric. And in hindsight, people think he was paranoid schizophrenic. But as a peasant who rose up and was for a short time the closest anyone had got at that point to unifying the country. Yes, Eric. Yeah, that is where I gained this information from. For anyone that hasn't seen it, that Netflix series is actually quite good. I don't know how much of it is dramatized or what, but I certainly enjoyed it. That's clever, George. So anyone that's not watching with chat, George just written Hiroshige once did a print that had some ladies in that had their parasols out, and the writing on the parasols was actually the name of a local company that had paid for the luxury of having their company name on said ladies' parasols. So it's really no different than Leonardo DiCaprio being paid to wear a Rolex to his most recent interview or something like that. You mean the Tokugawa? I don't think anyone in that period of Japanese history was particularly was a particularly nice man to be around. but they did produce some of the more interesting aspects of military history from that period. Yeah, it wasn't bad. I quite enjoyed it. I had it on whilst I was working for a couple of days. I feel it's a very good entry point into that period of Japanese history. They certainly did not. I feel like they all probably set out with a grand idea and felt like they were very noble in their cause. And then, as quite often happens, people gain power and then that power's never enough for them. It was, yeah, and I do like the way it was presented, Eric. I certainly enjoyed it. Someone who has always been sort of frustrated at the lack of sort of video based media on the subject and wanting to learn more. I enjoyed it. There's actually a great podcast. It's really old now. It was made in like 2010 by a guy. What's his name? Might be Cameron Foster. And he did a 20. He's an Australian professor of Japanese history, and did I think 26 part podcast series on sort of the history of Japan leading up into its unification and stuff, which I would advise anyone interested in the subject to check out. I think it's just called A History of Japan, and the guy's name's Cameron Foster. Yes, I've seen that, Eric, and the story of that guy is really, really interesting. Jed first told me about him, and the more I looked into him, he had a fascinating life. Yes, that is correct, George. I'm going to have to stop carving in a minute, guys. My neck's sore, but we'll sit and chat for the last 10 minutes or so. Right, so carving wise, that is going to be it for this evening. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to be pushing and plugging this last print a ton over the next couple of weeks. And for anyone that is currently watching that would be interested in receiving this print along with the others in the set through Patreon, you will be able to subscribe, but you can continue to subscribe afterwards, but this current series subscriptions for it will end on the 4th of July. 5th of July is when the last round of payments for this series go out, and then from that point on we'll be working on a new series. But the full set of prints will go on sale on my site. Excuse me. But they will only go on sale as the full set. You won't be able to purchase individual prints. But I'm going to be pushing this quite a lot over the next few weeks, so if it's frustrating for you guys to hear me talk about it all the time and post about it loads on social media and stuff, I do apologise, and it will only be for a short while. But we should, while this looks complex, we should get through it fairly quick. It should probably only take us a couple of weeks of sessions to get through this. I'm going to run through the whole tree first, and then we'll move up into this smaller carving up here. But it's not too bad, and a lot of the work can just be done with the knife, so I won't have to be going in and doing a ton of clearing out and stuff. And then there is, I think, 3 colour blocks. Yeah, so there's a pale sandy tone, a darker brown, and a sort of bluish grey tone that will have then a darker brown gradation on the top. So there'll only be 3 colour blocks to make of the for this print to finish it. But this will be shipping out on the 5th of July, and the books will follow soon after that. My brother is going to be making them, but it just so happens that he's back at work now that the UK is sort of opening up more. He's back in work full time now, so has less time to dedicate towards that, so it's going to take a little bit longer, but the books and stuff that you can house the prints in will be following along with that. But Oh yes, yeah. Thank you, Eric. I'll have a look right now. Okay, so okay, Eric. So there is for anyone. So I'll just put my phone on the thing for anyone that isn't on the Facebook group. First of all, you should be. Second of all, I'll just put my phone here for now. So you have. There's quite a few areas that aren't bound within the key block. So what I would do is, I assume you're going to be printing out the key block tracing at a size of whatever. So let's say A4, I would assume. Yeah, okay. So what I would do is I would trace the black, obviously, and then on separate layers I would trace the grey and the yellow. And when you print out your transfer for the black block, I would also print out, just on standard copy paper, the block for the yellow and the block for the grey. So when you have carved your black block, your key block, so to speak, and you've got the image there, you can overlay that. You can overlay the separations you make with the yellow and the grey block. So if I so that I can try and not complicate matters, I will essentially draw it out for you. So you've got your print with your tiger. Let's say this is the tiger here. There's his teeth and his eyes. So you'll do your tracing for that. You'll do an additional tracing that will have just the yellow, and another one that will have just the grey. You've got the feet and the bit of the muzzle and whatever, and then the tree. Print that off, carve that. And just keep these printed in the oh my god, can I do this upside down? Yes. Okay, then you will take however many colour separations you need, which will be, because you'll need that black information on your blocks. You've got grey, green, yellow, brown, blue. So you'll print off 5, is that number 5? So print off 5 versions of that, and then take your tracing and your printed off key block, your colour separations, overlay it over that, and then with a pencil or a brush or however you want to do it, trace over that one, trace over that one, and you could do it with all the blocks then, because you're tracing back onto what you've already carved. If you were to print all of those off and carve it all together, you would run the risk of there being say a separation in colour on for example, this area in here, or you could have some weird overlaps and stuff in and around here. It's quite an easy image to do that with. You are correct. It is simple in practice. It's a bit harder to explain, if that makes sense. So you just need to carve that, worry about the black, then print off so with your Baron, print however many separations for colours there are, and then use your additional tracings to trace those colours onto your separations. Does that make sense? Have I made something sound way more complex than it is? It's quite hard to explain. Hopefully that makes sense. But the image itself is really interesting, and it's a good way to learn that. I would, if I was you, put a border around it. It's going to make lining up, because there's no border on this image currently. I would put a black border around it, even if it's a thin one that you're going to carve away once you get to full printing, because it's going to allow you a lot more ease in registering everything, because there will already be a right angle and a straight line where you need to place your registration each time. Does that make sense? You'll be able to orientate that border to your registration marks. So for example, this print here, I've got my borders, and I know if something went catastrophically wrong, I've always got that measurement there, from there to there, and there to there, and there to there. And if something went wrong, I'm then able to go back to my master file, being this key block, and I'm able to get that registration information, and I can transfer that to any other block if the worst were to happen. And it's just a case of measuring it and then transferring that information to your blocks. But I hope that's not my terrible drawings. I hope that's not, I've complicated it too much. If you do have any more additional questions, I can try and type that out. I could probably DM me a message and I'll type it out, because it'd be easier for me to collate my thoughts and stuff in an email or a DM than it is for me to try and just sort of word it out on the fly, if that makes sense. But anyway, guys, we're coming up on the hour. So I will be back Tuesday. I'm probably going to get a bit of carving done on this over the weekend, because I'm printing now on Avatar, so that's usually takes me through till about lunchtime, and then I have a bit of time in the afternoon, so I'll probably get a little bit of work done on this just to sort of get going and get ahead on it, and hopefully I can maybe show you guys some printing on this as well. That'd be fun. I could probably line that up that I could be printing this on stream, because there's only going to be 40 copies and a few colours. None of the colours are really very hard. But anyway, guys, have a fantastic weekend, and everyone stay safe and take care, and I will see you all again Tuesday. Thank you very much for joining and sticking with me, and for the interesting conversation. It's much appreciated. Thank you. Take care, guys.